Okay, model complexity. So model complexity for me is a bit of a continuum. At one end of the spectrum, you have these things I like to refer to as kind of big dumb calculators. And at the other end, you have things that are closer to kind of almost AI type, whiz bang, super integrated bits of logic. And the key thing is, again, just to be aware of where you want your model to be on that continuum, because there are pros and cons with getting Excel to satisfy one or the other type of model. So in terms of big dumb calculators, as the name suggests, these are basically just big dumb aggregation machines. There are fewer calculations in there. They're extremely data heavy. There's usually a data entry penalty in terms of them not being as integrated. And there's also a real value perception. There's this view within particularly the financial modeling community that if a model isn't super integrated and kind of almost high tech from a logic and calculation perspective, there's a view that it doesn't really have any value. And this isn't necessarily the case. The key thing here is to be aware of what purpose and process you're trying to get your model to support. And then to the extent that you need something that is just a big dumb aggregator, build the model on that basis. In terms of the artificial intelligence side of things, yeah, sure, these models are highly integrated, but the penalty with them is that they often become quite scary. So you can have a model that's incredibly complex. The risk of that model is that it starts to give you answers that you can't necessarily interpret or understand yourself. And again, there's nothing wrong with having a model that's right at the far end of the AI side of the complexity continuum. The main thing is making sure that that's fit for purpose. So to the extent that you don't have a financial modeler running your model, having somebody build you a whiz-bang piece of kit is actually going to end up with them being scared of it and not being able to get the best out of it. There's also an extent to which models can become too complex. So we have a client who's got an impressive bit of kit, but it's so dense in terms of logic that they've nicknamed it HAL 9000 because the model is practically self-aware in terms of the level of complexity it's got implemented in it. Now, the reason why I've also included their implication for build sequence is that you can actually move from one area to another. So a lot of the time when we're building models for clients, we will separate out certain areas of the model and build them on what we refer to as an amounts-based basis. So they have an area in the model that they can just type numbers into. And again, the value perception here is that it's not the most complex and it's not the most impressive bit of modeling. However, it is very easy for someone to use. Now, the reason why there's an implication for a build sequence is if I build a client a model with an amounts-based area for a certain part of the modeling, they can get comfortable with that piece of analysis. And then ultimately what we can do is take those assumptions and rotate them into more complex calculations and have them actually driven. So from a build sequence perspective, always be aware of locations in the model where you can actually sacrifice a degree of complexity to get the user comfortable with having to use the model and kind of get to grips with data entry in the first instance and then moving slowly into, well, okay, let's replace those with calculations. So we ultimately might end up at the AI end of the spectrum, but we've actually taken the client on a slightly slower and more manageable journey than just dropping this whiz-bang complex piece of modeling technology into their lap and scaring the life out of them.